Hello, everybody. This is Seth Endicott from the Center for Student Achievement at Salisbury University. And today I'm going to present about study skills to survive college. Today we'll discuss three main study strategies and discuss tips and techniques for each. We'll start with time management, then go into note-taking strategies, and then we'll close with talking about study strategies. Let's get started. Of all the skills that you will need in college and later in life, time management might be the most important. We're going to talk about three main ways to ensure that you have good time management. And those three ways are prioritizing, scheduling out your tasks and assignments, and managing distractions. For prioritizing, you have to prioritize two things: your time and then your syllabi and assignments. When you get to college, you're going to want to prioritize when you're studying, when your classes are, and make sure you have time for those. Make sure to put your athletics on your schedule. If you have a job, whether it's a campus job or off-campus job, make sure that you have time to do that, but also time to still go to all your classes and complete your schoolwork. And you have to prioritize your social time as well. One big tool that you could use for prioritization is the Eisenhower decision matrix. This matrix is a good guide to tell you and help you decipher when to do a task. If the task is important or urgent or both, if it's important and urgent, meaning maybe an assignment's a lot of points, it's also due pretty soon, you want to do the task now. If the assignment's important, maybe it's a test worth a lot of points, but it's in 4 or 5 days, you want to do it, but it may not be the first thing you end up doing. If something is not urgent, or excuse me, something is not important but urgent, you may want to do it, but after you do the important and urgent things first. And if something is not important nor is it urgent, then delete that task. Save it for later, do it when you get done everything else, or you can delegate it to somebody else. So making sure you prioritize your academics first. Everything else, such as athletics, your job, time to socialize, will fall in place. You do have 168 hours in a week, and believe it or not, you do have time to do all these things. For your syllabi and assignments, as I talked about in the Eisenhower decision matrix, you have two main questions. When is the assignment due? Obviously, if the assignment is due tomorrow or in a few days, the sooner you do it, the better. And then how much is the assignment worth? Is there a lot of points attached to this assignment? If you can answer yes to both of these questions, do the assignment right now. If it's due right now, even if it's not worth a lot of points or it's due today, you still want to do that soon because you want to complete all your work. If the assignment's due later, maybe it's later in the week, whether it's worth a lot of points or not a lot of points, you may want to move that back just a little bit. So our next big task for time management, next skill, is scheduling. In high school, it might be easier for you to schedule because your schedule's made. You have class all day, most days. It's at a set time every day, Monday through Friday, and you may have homework, but you kind of know that you're doing your homework at night before your assignments are due. College, your schedule is much more flexible. There's going to be days that you have 8 o'clock classes. There's going to be days you have no class at all. Everybody's schedule is different. So making sure you record that and not try to keep it in your head is one key strategy to use, especially coming in as a freshman. I have found that most students who struggle their freshman year do not keep any sort of to-do list, any sort of planner, whether it's on paper or on the computer. And that leads to them forgetting a lot of assignments, a lot of deadlines and due dates. And then that gets them behind in classes. So it's very important to schedule out what you're going to do. There's a few ways you can do it, as I mentioned. The to-do list would just be, you could go through all your syllabi and write down all your assignments for the week, and then just rank them of the order you're going to do them. Make a list, rank them in order of when you're going to do them, and then when you're done, cross off that assignment on your list. You could also do a semester calendar. I highly encourage this at the beginning of the semester, where you print out several month calendar on one page, and you only put your tests, exams, and major assignments, such as big writing papers or projects or speeches. This kind of gives you a big picture of all your important things, and you can see it in one viewing, one swoop. A weekly schedule is really good as well. You don't want to plan just day by day, because if you do, there's going to be a lot of days where you see a lot of homework that comes up and you're going to feel overwhelmed, or you're going to see that you have a quiz today and it's going to be too late to study for it. So I always encourage students to plan. Maybe it's on a Sunday. You write out your assignments for the next 1 to 2 weeks. That'll help you get ahead of deadlines. That'll help you see the big picture of what's coming up. Maybe you have a lot of assignments due on Tuesday, or maybe they're due on Thursday. So let's say the assignments are due on Thursday, and you don't have anything to do, any homework on Monday or Tuesday night. So instead of waiting to do everything on Wednesday night, you plan to do a little bit of your homework Monday, a little bit Tuesday, and then finish it up on Wednesday. Very important to keep a weekly schedule to kind of see ahead when your tests are coming, when bigger assignments are due. And I encourage to stay 1 to 2 weeks ahead. 2 weeks is ideal. And then plan your studying time. So maybe you make a calendar, your weekly calendar, and you have all your classes down. You put down when you're going to eat, when you hope to sleep. If you have a job, you write that down, or you play a sport, you write that down. But then you're going to have a lot of gaps in your schedule. Write out your study time. So maybe Tuesdays and Thursdays, you have a gap from 10 to 11. And instead of doing nothing, maybe you write down study chemistry, which means that's your time that you can study, do chemistry homework. Maybe you go to a tutoring session, but it is predetermined that that's what you're going to do on your schedule. Writing out this time will help you stay more accountable to actually studying your courses and getting ahead of things before they're due. Breaking down large assignments. This could be a big paper. This could also be a test, creating a study plan for an exam down the road. But let's use the paper as an example. What you don't want to do is a paper's due Sunday night at 11:59 and you do the paper all day Sunday. You're skipping a lot of steps. You probably won't get things edited. You may burn out after a few hours. So you want to break down your paper into steps and set many deadlines, so you don't have to worry about, cramming and pulling an all-nighter before it's due. So the easy steps for this is, first, look at your assignment, find your writing assignment in your syllabus, read the assignment, understand what the assignment's telling you, then find the due date, and then create a list, almost like a to-do list of many deadlines, and break down the large, let's say it's a 6-page paper. Let's break the large 6-page paper down into several pieces that you can do throughout the semester. Maybe the first one is selecting a research topic. Put a date when you would like to have that done. Then it might be an outline. Create another date of when you'd like the outline done. Then maybe you want to do the rough draft, but you don't want to do all 6 pages at once. So you create a day where you do the first half of the rough draft, and then maybe another day, maybe a day or two later, that you do the other part of the rough draft. After that, create another date where you want to get your paper edited. I would prefer, or I would it would be best to get your paper edited from your professor if possible, which means you have to get it done somewhat early, or going to a writing center at your university. And then a deadline to do the final draft. So you'll set those deadlines. Maybe your paper's due on November 1st. So October 1st, you want to research and pick your topic. October 10th, you want to have your outline complete. October 15th and 17th, you want to do rough draft 1 and rough draft 2. October 22nd, you want to do your edits. And on the day before the paper's due, you want to make your edits, read the paper one more time, and then turn in your final draft. So once you get that through a paper, just record those deadlines and put it on your time management device. Maybe it's on your to-do list, maybe it's in your planner, maybe it's on your Google Calendar, but make sure those deadlines are recorded and follow through with them. The last big aspect of time management I want to talk about is managing distractions. This is a huge one, not just for college students, but for all students. So before we even get into some of the strategies, think about what distracts you. Also, when you know what distracts you, think of a plan for how to deal with those distractions. How can you remove that distraction? Why is it distracting you? So once you can remove yourself from that distraction or have a plan to mitigate that distraction, then you're ready to use some other strategies to make sure while you're studying or while you're doing your homework that you can do that efficiently. One strategy to do is to create study breaks. Usually it's not a good idea to do 3 straight hours of homework or 3 straight hours of studying for a test. You may want to break it up and say, I'm going to do 45 minutes, for example, of studying, and then I want to take a 10-minute break. So you're studying in shorter spurts, but during that time of study, you're only focusing on studying. A list of study breaks could be any breaks that last 5 to 10 minutes that are an actual break that remove you from the studying, but that you can get back on task from them. So maybe a break is doing push-ups, or a break might be using the bathroom or getting a snack or checking email or checking your TikTok, whatever it might be. Make sure you can take those breaks, but make sure the breaks don't go over the allotted 5 or 10 minutes. It's always important too to let your support system know, whether it's mother, father, friends, significant other, whoever it might be, when you want to study, when you're planning to study, so they're less likely to call you or communicate with you during those times. So create that list of breaks, and during your 5 to 10 minute study break, you study 45. The 5 to 10 minutes, use one of your study breaks and then get back on task. And then most importantly, don't multitask. You do have time to do everything, but you're going to get things done more efficiently and more effectively if you're singularly focused on that task, such as the homework assignment or such as studying. So when you do study, don't have your phone out with you, don't have your email window up, don't study with a bunch of friends who might not be on task or might not keep you on task. You want to just singularly focus on getting that task or homework assignment done. So now I want you to take a little bit of time and try this activity to hammer home the point of multitasking. So I would like you to set a timer for 1 minute. And during that minute, you're going to do 2 things at the same time. You're going to count backwards out loud from 200, and you're going to write about a story about how your week is going. After that minute is up, write down the lowest number in words that you were able to write. So if you got down to 176, write 176. If you recorded 15 words, then write the number 15. So go ahead and stop this PowerPoint and set your timer for a minute and go ahead and try this activity. When finished, come back to the PowerPoint. After you return from the PowerPoint and you have your numbers now, I want you to try this activity one more time. However, you're only going to write your story for 1 minute. So you're no longer counting backwards from 200, only write your story. Once the timer is up, write the number of words you were able to write. And then see and compare which strategy was more effective and efficient for you getting your story written. Now we're going to jump into some note-taking strategies. We're going to talk about 3 main topics that have to do with note-taking, and those are organization, generating questions, and you'll hear a lot of this, and cumulative review. So in note-taking for college, the most important thing you can do is take notes in every class. Whether your class has a PowerPoint, whether it has a packet, whether you have to just take notes in a notebook or on the computer, whether there's a lecture or maybe the professor goes off in tangents and talks about random things, you still need to make sure every day in class that you are taking notes. Separate your courses to stay organized, whether that be a folder for each class with your notes in it. Maybe you create a binder for each class that separates your subjects, or you have a notebook for each class or a 5-subject notebook that separates your classes. Make sure your notes are organized and easy to find. Print your PowerPoints also. A lot of classes will have PowerPoints. The professor will lecture on that PowerPoint, but it's important to still take notes and write your notes on the side of that PowerPoint, even if some of the stuff you write is the same thing that's being relayed on the PowerPoint. Same thing with your online notes. All right, if you have an online class, make sure you're taking notes for that class still. And lastly, title and date all of your notes. This is going to help your notes be easier to find, and it's going to help you be able to organize your notes a little bit better and come up with a main idea of what that lecture might be about. Generating questions from notes. So regardless of what method you take notes in, it might just be write everything down. It might be write on the PowerPoint. It might be Cornell notes. It might be outline notes or bullet points. Take notes in class how you normally would. After class, reread your notes, and if necessary, rewrite them. But then create questions that mirror what you write in your notes. So for example, you may have wrote the colors of the rainbow in your notes. That was what the lecture was about. You may want to create a question that mirrors that. So your question may be, name all of the colors that's for the, name all the colors in the Roy G. Biv. Or what does the Roy G. Biv acronym stand for? Then your question that you ask, the answer is right there in the notes. Create 3 or 4 of these questions for each page in notes that give you the main idea of the lecture. At the bottom of the page or the bottom of your notes, draw a horizontal line and write a 1-sentence summary of what the lecture is about. This is a good way of predicting what a big essay or test question may be. Good question starters are also important to take good notes. So it is great to ask questions with your notes that are not yes or no questions. Some good question starters here, and these are not the exhaustive list, this is just a start, are what? You can ask what is questions or what would you do type questions. How, why questions. Maybe you're taking notes in a math or a science class. Solve might be a good question starter. Explain, compare, find, also a good question for math, and illustrate. Maybe you drew a picture in your notes, or there was a graph that you were going over in a book or in class. Writing a question that starts with illustrate this and describe what this picture was about is a great question to start your notes with. So make sure you come up with good question starters for your notes. And as you see here with question starters such as solve, explain, compare, find, and illustrate, all these questions don't have to end in a question mark. Lastly, and probably most importantly, review your notes regularly. You take all that time in class to write down your notes and make them organized, but if you don't review them, your notes are going to be pretty useless. I always use the story of my dad's 1985 Corvette. He bought this Corvette. He rarely drove it and would try to start it 2 or 3 times a year. Usually when he tried to start it, something went wrong. It wouldn't start. He would have to get it fixed. And eventually he ended up selling his Corvette because it wasn't worth the money or the hassle for him. The lesson of this is he didn't use his Corvette enough for it to be effective. Same thing with your notes. If you take notes on the first day of class and you don't look at them or review them until the day before the exam, most of the time your notes are not going to work. So as we talked about earlier with your notes, a review of your notes that night might be rereading your notes and then creating those mirror questions so you have quiz material for your class. That'll also help you fill any gaps in of the material that maybe the material is a little fuzzy or doesn't make sense. With those questions, quiz yourself weekly. Simply cover up your answers and ask the question and see if, without looking, if you can answer those questions. And then make any adjustments to notes. As I said, if there's any points of clarification you may need, look in the book, ask a classmate, or go to your professor and get clarification. If you missed material, maybe you missed a class, or maybe the lecture was too fast and you missed bits and pieces of the lecture, go into your book again or ask a classmate to make up that missed material and record it. And then change any questions if needed. If you need to ask further questions about your notes or the mirror questions that you wrote, you want to make them more detailed or just change them because you think you're missing the important point, this is a great time when you're reviewing your notes to do this. Make sure to review. The more you review your notes before an exam and actually quiz yourself, the better chance you're going to have a good idea of what your notes were about when exam day hits. Lastly, let's talk about some study strategies. We're going to answer a few main topics here, leading off with the question of how to study and how much. Active studying techniques. We'll talk about the difference of active and passive studying and why active studying is more effective. And then metacognition, which is simply thinking about your thinking. We'll talk about those strategies in the upcoming slides. So how to study. We talk about active studying. Active studying is being engaged with your notes. Usually that involves writing something down or saying something. Passive studying may be something such as just reviewing your notes or reading them without any purpose but to memorize those notes. So you want to actively engage in your notes. The more you try from your notes, the more questions you ask, the more problems you try, the better off you're going to be. All right, the better idea you're going to have if you really understand the material or don't understand. Cumulative study. We kind of mentioned this with the notes, but just in general, whether it's a book, whether it's your notes, whether it's your PowerPoints, you want to study in college cumulatively. You want to study every day a little bit. So build in that time in your schedule. You're taking a class such as history even, or math or chemistry. Make sure that you're going over that material a little bit every day so that when the next lecture comes up, you have the concepts down and the main ideas, and then you can continue to master the material. Time needed per course is also really important. A lot of students underestimate that. So usually the rule of thumb for colleges is for every credit hour that you take, you add 3 times as much study hours outside of class. I think you can realistically do 2 per hour of class. You could do 3 as well, depending on the class. So for example, let's say your chemistry course is 3 credits. If you were doing a 3 times 1 strategy of studying, of time needed, you would be studying 9 hours outside of class each week for that course. If you do 2 times that amount, you'd be studying 6 hours a week. So the majority of your learning, and this is the 80-20 rule being flipped, the majority of your learning is going to be done outside of class. You'll go to your lecture, the professor's usually going to give you some practice or the main points, the nuts and bolts of what you need to learn. And then outside of class, you have to be able to learn and master the material. And that's what the 80-20 rule is. A lot of times in K through 12 education, you're learning 80% of the material in class and 20% of the material outside of class. However, in college, that rule's flipped. So usually about 20% of the material that you actually learn is during your class time, which means the other 80%, you're going to have to find ways to learn that material and spend a lot of time outside of class so that you can ensure that you're mastering the material for each course. So as we mentioned, active studying techniques, we mentioned what it is. We mentioned the difference between active and passive studying. Active studying is just doing something while you study. Okay, so for your textbook, just think of the verbs. Writing questions down, annotating on the side of your page, reading to answer your questions and having a purpose. Those are some strategies you can use to study your textbook. Maybe you try problems out if it's a math or a chemistry textbook. Don't just read the problems or read the material, but actually get engaged with it. For your notes, generate questions. We talked about that earlier. Rewrite your notes. Say your notes out loud. Those are some good active strategies that you can use for note taking. PowerPoints, same thing applies. Create questions out of your PowerPoint. Make flashcards from your PowerPoint slides and quiz yourself. Flashcards and Quizlets are great too. Some are already created for certain courses and some you may have to create on your own. But the more you quiz yourself on these flashcards or Quizlets, the better idea you're going to have if you really understand the material. Taking practice tests is another great way to actively study. So before an exam, you may have a study guide or you may have a practice test. It's good to put yourself in the test situation as close to the test situation as you can to get a good gauge of how you understand the material. So your test may be 1 hour. So your practice test, let's say that you have, go to a classroom if possible, an empty classroom, take that practice test, time yourself for 1 hour, and don't look at any of the material, any of your notes, anything from your textbook or PowerPoint slides, and just take the practice test. At the end of that hour, or when you're done answering the questions, then go back and check your answers and use the material if you need help with it or need to clear up any questions that you may have missed. The last strategy might be the most important. Teaching the material. If you can teach the material to somebody, you've got it. So for an example, I might look at your math notes or look at the math book and I might tell you what the math problem is. And for you to stand up and on a board, write down how you do the problem and explain to me each of the steps of the problem. Teach me the material. Okay, maybe it's a history class and you want to tell the difference between you need to know the difference between the Republican and Democratic parties. So we might have you come up front or with a partner and just be able to tell the person about both of those differences, hit your main points without looking at your notes. As I said, again, if you can teach the material to somebody, then almost assuredly you will do well on the test. Metacognition, as we mentioned, thinking about your thinking. So this is the last thing I want you to really hone in on to see how much you're learning the material in your courses. So if you see here, there are 6 steps to Bloom's taxonomy, which kind of could tell you how deep of an understanding you have of that material. The first step is to remember the material. So if you can remember things from flashcards or remember facts and equations, just the actual equation, then you're at the remembering stage. And that might be good enough for some tests or some quizzes, but a lot of times it won't be. So the next step of Bloom's will be to get the understanding. So if you can describe an example, maybe you can use an example of a definition that you have, or you can describe or paraphrase what that term is or how to use that concept, then you have an understanding of it. Applying might be a math class and you have a concept or an equation, and you can actually implement that or execute it. You can see a problem and know what equation you need to plug in and actually apply that equation to solve that problem. Analyze might be organizing or comparing and contrasting. Maybe there's two things that you need to compare and contrast or differentiate. You're able to draw a deeper understanding and be able to kind of be able to compare and contrast those materials and that content for better understanding of what you need to know. And then evaluating might be able to arguing or defending a decision. Maybe you're learning about a court case. There was a decision on that case, and you could tell both the pros and the cons of that decision. Why was this the right decision? Why was it the wrong decision? You may be able to explain why, for example, maybe you believe federalist government is better than anti-federalist government. So if you can argue your point and you can defend it, you're at the evaluating stage. And then creating, you might be able to create your own problems to do. You might be able, off of a type of government system or judicial branch, you might be able to create your own judicial branch and give reasons for that. A lot of courses you won't have to get to the create level, but one thing to always pay attention to when you're learning and for each class is how high do you need to go on this Bloom's taxonomy chart. You know, if you're only at the remembering stage and really most of your test questions are asking you to understand, then you have to come up with some strategies on how can I better understand the material. So this is a great tool to kind of use to just see and gauge where you're at and how deep you're learning the course material, and if that is the necessary depth that you need. That is all I have for today. I'd like to thank you a lot for watching this, and hopefully some of these strategies will help you as you navigate into college soon. So good luck the rest of this year and good luck in the future.